So this video is our introductory video for Unit 3, our unit on the Revolution and Enlightenment. This PowerPoint is in the barn under the Enlightenment folder, but it's a really long PowerPoint. So what we're going to do is divide it into a few different videos. So today your assignment is on the top half, you're going to take notes on your left side, and then the second half you're going to summarize this in one paragraph. So you know how this comes out a little weird on the Macs, but this is the beginning to the Revolution and Enlightenment. This began around 1650 to 1700, and you tend to think of the capital, if you will, of the Enlightenment as France. Remember the scientific revolution, we realized that scientists were trying to find truths, and a way to take the scientific method and apply it to non-scientific areas was what they called using reason. And the Enlightenment focused on using reason to solve problems rather than emotion. We learned about Newton and how he was concerned with science, but these thinkers were trying to take his ideas and applying them to other areas. So therefore, trying to figure out, are there universal laws concerning politics, economics, or human behavior that philosophers could discover? One of these philosophers was John Locke. And as a side note, our founding father Thomas Jefferson claimed that John Locke, along with Bacon and Newton, were one of the three most important people ever on the earth. Now, his ideas influenced the founding fathers, the idea of the pursuit of life and liberty, that all comes from Locke. Now, one of his theories was the tabula rasa, and that's the idea that when you're born, your mind is like a blank slate. And you're born without knowledge and opinions, and your experiences shape who you are and who you become. And if your knowledge and opinions are based on your individual experiences, your experiences are what you perceive through your senses. And that those experiences shape by what you see, by what you hear, things like that. So if you think of the nature versus nurture debate, Locke would definitely favor the nature debate, that you are what you experience and that you are what you sense. So the issue is, if you can influence what people hear, what people see, and what they otherwise sense and then experience, you can shape who they are. So this is that here. So the idea was that you could manage, if you can manage what people experience, you could therefore improve society, because you can then change who those people become. So you could change a society as a whole by just changing what people sense. The problem, however, is, can you trust your senses? Because remember, we discussed earlier Descartes' ideas that you can't always trust your senses. Like, you may see things that don't always exist, or hear things that don't always exist. So this is just one of his many philosophies that influenced Locke and other Enlightenment philosophers. He was a bit of a Renaissance man himself. Despite having political theories, he actually had a degree in medicine and wrote about religious toleration and a whole variety of things. All right. Now let's, John Locke is just one example of a philosopher, and this is just one example of things that philosophers discussed. So philosophers, that's a French term basically for philosopher, and they were the intellectual philosophers of the Enlightenment who applied reason to society. So they often met at places like salons, and salons, don't think of a hair salon, but basically almost like a tavern where people would meet, sometimes in the homes of influential people. And they met to discuss these ideas, and their goal was to solve real-world problems, problems about religious fanaticism, or religious toleration, or oppressive monarchies, poverty, slavery, all sorts of human issues at the time. If you remind me in class, I have a book with some cool pictures of these salons. So another example of a philosopher who would meet at these salons is Charles-Louis Montesquieu, and he was French. And his works also influenced our founding documents. And almost all of our founding fathers, people like Hamilton, Madison, Jefferson, referred to him in their written works or letters. So decades before our revolution, one of his many works was something called The Spirit of the Laws. And this was a political treatise. And it observed basically three types of governments. It observed republican governments, monarchical governments, and despotic governments. So monarchical, think of a king and queen. Despotic, think of like a totalitarian ruler, his way or the highway. It can be similar to a monarchy, but usually think a bit more controlling. So his idea was that the main difference in how these three types of governments worked was a few things, but the big thing was how they extended rights to their citizens or subjects. Okay, if you were from a republic, you were a citizen. If you were under a monarchy or maybe a dictatorship type situation, you would probably be a subject. And he made these observations by using the scientific method, observing them, noticing their differences, noticing the difference in their histories. One thing worth noting is he did focus on that a republic had a unique love of virtue, and that's an Enlightenment characteristic, this idea of virtue, putting the interest of a community ahead of private interests, but not by force, but by character of the people. So he also wrote about separation of powers. We're going to focus that next class. Oops. But before we see that video, make sure you know that the password is seagull. Yes, make us think of warm beach weather, seagull.